You believe you're doing everything right. You work, you strive, you seek knowledge, you try to improve, and still, money doesn't flow the way it should. There's always that uncomfortable feeling that something is stuck, as if there were an invisible ceiling. And maybe there is, but it's not what you think. It's not a lack of opportunity. It's not the government. It's not the market. And it's definitely not a lack of talent. It's something much deeper. A belief. A silent belief hidden inside your mind. And that's exactly what Andrew Carnegie discovered when he rose from extreme poverty to become one of the richest men in history. He realized that wealth doesn't start in your pocket. It starts in your mind. And what blocks most people is not a lack of money. It's an unconscious rejection of wealth. Yes, it may sound strange, but many people say they want to be rich, while deep down, they believe wealth is something negative. Let's be direct. If inside you there is any association between money and things like greed, corruption, selfishness, or exploitation, you will sabotage yourself, because no one wants to become what they despise. Think about it carefully. How many times have you heard phrases like, "Money changes people. Rich people are bad. Anyone with a lot of money did something wrong. It's better to be simple than ambitious." These phrases seem harmless, but they are seeds. And when planted repeatedly, they create internal conflict. On one side, you want to prosper. On the other, you believe that prosperity turns you into something bad. And that's where the block is born. Because your mind will always protect you from what you believe is dangerous, even if that means keeping you small. Carnegie understood something few people grasp. The greatest limit to wealth is not external. It's psychological. He said that a man who cannot control his own mind will never be able to control his financial reality. And this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with mental programming. If you grew up hearing that money is hard, you will make it hard. If you grew up believing that only a few can become rich, you will exclude yourself from the game before even trying. If you associate wealth with guilt, you will avoid success without realizing it. And the most dangerous part is that all of this happens automatically. You don't notice. You just feel like something doesn't work. But there is a pattern. Observe your life honestly. Every time you start to grow, something happens. A bad decision, a sudden fear, an opportunity you ignore, procrastination that appears out of nowhere. This is not coincidence. It's self-sabotage. And it doesn't come from laziness. It comes from identity. You act according to who you believe you are. If deep down you don't see yourself as someone prosperous, you will never sustain prosperity. You may even make money, but you'll lose it. You may even grow, but you'll regress, because your mind will always try to bring you back to your comfort level. Now understand this deeply. Wealth is not just about earning more. It's about becoming someone capable of maintaining and expanding what you earn. And that requires an internal shift. Carnegie didn't just accumulate money. He rebuilt the way he thought. He began to see money as a tool, not as a problem, not as a danger, but as an amplifier. Money doesn't corrupt. It reveals. It amplifies what already exists within you. If you are generous, you'll have more to give. If you are disciplined, you'll have more to build. If you are visionary, you'll have more to expand. But if you believe money is bad, you will never allow it to stay in your life. And here is the turning point. You don't need to fight money. You need to rebuild your relationship with it. Ask yourself, what do I really think about rich people? What do I feel when I see someone prospering? Do I admire or judge? Do I get inspired or criticize? Because the way you see others is the way your mind defines what is possible for you. If you criticize success, you are rejecting success. If you despise those who became wealthy, you are telling your mind that wealth is wrong. And your mind obeys. It simply prevents you from getting there. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine starting to admire wealth built with intelligence. Imagine seeing money as freedom, as impact, as growth. Imagine replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of thinking, "This is not for me," you start thinking, What did this person do that I haven't done yet? This is the breaking point. This is where transformation begins. Because when you change perception, you change decisions. And when you change decisions, you change your destiny. Carnegie understood that wealth is a result of alignment. Alignment between thought, belief, and action. If any of these three are misaligned, results don't come. You can act a lot, but if you believe little, you stall. You can believe a lot, but if you act wrong, you fail. But when all three are aligned, growth becomes inevitable. And that's why most people never get there. Because they keep trying to change the result without changing the root. They want more money, but keep the same beliefs. They want better results, but keep thinking small. They want to prosper, but feel uncomfortable with prosperity. And that creates an invisible cycle. You try, you fail, you get frustrated, and you reinforce the belief that it's not for you. But the truth is different. It's not that it's not for you. It's that your mind still doesn't allow it. And until that changes, nothing truly changes. So here is something direct. You don't need more effort. You need more clarity. Clarity to identify the beliefs that are limiting you. Clarity to understand that many of them aren't even yours. They were inherited from family, from culture, from environment. And what was learned can be unlearned. But that requires awareness and courage, because changing beliefs means questioning everything you've always accepted as truth. And that's uncomfortable. But it's also liberating. The question now is simple. Are you willing to confront what you believe? Or will you keep yourself trapped in an invisible cycle? Because the belief blocking you today is not obvious. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It disguises itself as realism, as being cautious, as being grounded. But deep down, it's fear. And while that fear is driving your decisions, wealth will remain distant. But the moment you see this, the game changes. Because awareness eliminates invisible control. And now you can choose. Stay the same, or reprogram your mind for a new level. And it all starts with an internal decision. I no longer reject wealth. I become someone capable of sustaining it. And when that decision becomes real, not just thought, but felt, your behavior changes. Your choices change. Your standards change. And inevitably, your results change too. And this is where most people stop. But you won't stop here. Because there is a second level to this belief. Deeper, more silent, and far more dangerous. It's not just about thinking money is bad. It's about not feeling worthy of it. Yes, this is the layer almost no one sees. You may say you want to be rich. You may study, work, seek opportunities. But deep down, there's a voice that says, this isn't for me. People like me don't get there. I don't have what it takes. And that voice shapes everything. Because it defines your invisible standard. You don't earn what you want. You earn what you believe you deserve. And that changes everything. Because now we're no longer talking about money. We're talking about identity. Carnegie understood that external wealth is just a reflection of internal structure. And he knew that no one sustains a level of life that doesn't match their self-image. That's why so many people have moments of growth and then lose everything. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's internal coherence. The mind always seeks balance. If you grow beyond what you believe you deserve, it creates mechanisms to pull you back. Bad decisions, irrational fears, lack of consistency, or even normal choices that secretly sabotage your progress. Now pay attention. How many opportunities have you missed? How many times did you think about doing something bigger and gave up before even trying? How many times did you compare yourself to someone successful and conclude that reality was too far from yours? That's not lack of ability. That's lack of internal permission. And without permission, there is no expansion. Carnegie believed that the first step to becoming rich wasn't making money. It was deeply accepting that you can be rich. And that sounds simple, But it's not. Because accepting this requires breaking old stories. Stories you may not even remember when they started. Maybe you grew up seeing financial struggle. Maybe you heard life is hard. Maybe you saw people trying and failing. And little by little, you built a limited worldview. A worldview where growing too much feels risky. Where standing out feels dangerous. Where having a lot feels wrong. And that creates an invisible block. You move, but never run. You grow, but never explode. Because deep down, there's a break. And here's the hard truth. That break won't disappear on its own. It must be confronted. And confronting it requires a radical shift in posture. You need to stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to improve and start seeing yourself as someone who decides to grow. There's a huge difference. Those who try act when they feel motivated. Those who decide act regardless of how they feel. And wealth requires decision, not emotion. Because if you depend on motivation, you'll stop when it gets hard. But if you depend on decision, you continue. And that's what builds results. Carnegie didn't get where he did because he was the smartest. He got there because he was the most committed to his vision. He decided who he would become before having any external proof. And that shift changes everything. Most people wait for results to believe. But those who prosper believe first. They build an identity strong enough to sustain the process. Now think about this. If you started today acting like someone who already operates at a higher level, what would change? How would you think? How would you decide? Who would you connect with? What would you stop tolerating? Because that's exactly what creates the leap. You don't grow and then become that person. You become that person, and then you grow. That inversion is powerful, and almost no one understands it. Most try to improve results without improving internal standards, but that never sustains. Now let's go even deeper. There's a third level to this belief, even more subtle. It's the fear of what comes with wealth. Responsibility, exposure, judgment, pressure. When you grow, you become visible. And being visible is scary, because now you can be criticized, questioned, envied. And for many people, that weighs more than the desire to prosper. So unconsciously, they choose to stay where they are. Not because they don't want to grow, but because they want to avoid what comes after growth. And that blocks everything. Because wealth isn't just benefit. It's expansion. And expansion brings pressure. But here's the shift. You don't need to eliminate fear. You need to stop obeying it. Fear will always exist, but it cannot be your guide. Carnegie understood that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. And that's what separates those who grow from those who only dream. Now look at your life. Where is fear deciding for you? Where are you holding back? Where are you accepting less than you could? Because those answers show exactly where the block is. And identifying it is already half the journey. The other half is action. But not just any action. Aligned action. Action that reinforces the new identity. Action that proves to yourself that you're changing. Because belief doesn't change only with thought. It changes with evidence. You need to create proof. Small at first, but consistent. Different decisions, different actions, different results. And little by little, your mind starts accepting a new standard. A standard where growth is natural, where prosperity is allowed, where wealth is no longer a conflict, but a consequence. And at that point, everything accelerates, because there is no more internal resistance. There is flow. And when there is flow, progress stops being heavy and becomes inevitable. But understand this. This process is not comfortable. It will require you to abandon old versions of yourself, to think differently from the majority, to make decisions others won't understand. And that may distance you from environments, people, old patterns. But that's the price of evolution. You don't build a new reality. without leaving the old one behind. And this is where many retreat. Because growth requires rupture, and rupture hurts. But staying the same costs much more. Because time passes, and unrealized potential turns into frustration. And that frustration is heavy, much heavier than the discomfort of change. So the choice is clear: temporary discomfort of growth or permanent discomfort of stagnation. And that choice, no one can make for you. But if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you already knows there's more, knows you can do more, knows your current reality is not the limit. And that awareness is the beginning of change. Now the final question: will you ignore it or act? Because understanding without action changes nothing, but deciding and sustaining that decision changes everything. And this is where the game truly shifts. Because when the game shifts, it's not because the world changed. It's because you changed how you see the world. And that changes everything. Now you start seeing opportunities you once ignored, paths where you once saw obstacles. You act with more precision and less doubt. But there's a crucial detail. This new level is not sustained by enthusiasm alone. It requires structure. Because without structure, even the best mindset collapses. And that's what Carnegie built. He didn't just think differently. He operated differently. He created systems, routines, environments, and above all, discipline. Because discipline sustains identity when emotion fails. If you want to unlock your wealth, you must change what you do daily. Because your daily actions are the materialization of your beliefs. If your actions stay the same, your beliefs haven't truly changed. So here's the operational shift. Start living at the next level before it becomes visible. Make decisions that feel uncomfortable for your current self. Raise your standards. Say no to what you used to accept. And build environments that support growth. Because environment shapes behavior. Behavior shapes results. Carnegie surrounded himself with high-level thinkers. He got close to those already where he wanted to be. And that accelerated everything. Now ask yourself, are your processes moving you forward or keeping you stuck? Because results are just reflections of accumulated processes. Improve the process, and results improve. Consistency is not doing a lot. It's doing what's necessary every day. Without motivation, without validation, without applause. Because real growth happens in silence. And that requires maturity. Patience is not waiting. It's continuing to act intelligently while results don't appear. And that requires emotional control. There will be hard days, moments of doubt, phases where nothing seems to work. And that's where most quit. But those who understand the game keep going because they know results are cumulative. And accumulation takes time. Carnegie took years to build his empire. But every decision stacked, every action compounded, and that created exponential growth. Now think, are you stacking actions that move you forward or backward? Because it's not about intensity, it's about direction. And small adjustments in direction, over time, create massive change. But there's one final point: responsibility. As long as you blame external factors, you have no power. The moment you take full responsibility, you take control. And that changes everything. Now, no matter the situation, you find a way. No matter the obstacle, you create a solution. No matter the difficulty, you adjust. That is a builder's mindset. Carnegie didn't accept excuses. He accepted challenges. And that made all the difference. So now the question is direct. Are you living as someone who builds or someone who reacts? Because those who react, those who build, an action aligned with identity, process, and environment always produces results, without exception, but only for those who stay in the game. And now you understand. Wealth was never blocked in the world. It was always conditioned. by the level you choose to operate at. And that choice starts now.